Now, let's talk about food sources of serine. Now, these are some of the best sources that you can get your hands on. Food sources, these are listed as milligrams of serine per 100 grams of weight of the food. So you can see here, spirulina is the highest amount, 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams. Eggs, soybean. I'm going to say if you eat soy, I highly recommend that you don't buy standard GMO soy. You definitely want to make sure it's organic. And if you're trying to follow no grain, no pain, this one we would even keep out at least temporarily as the gut's trying to make a recovery. Turkey, chicken, pork, sunflower seeds, beef, and tofu, which is basically a derivative of soy. So if you're following no grain, no pain, I would keep that one out at least temporarily. Salmon and sesame, tuna and tempeh, flax, shrimp, lentils, chickpeas, almonds, green peas, etc. So there's plenty of different sources, both animal-based and plant-based, for serine. So you're in good luck there. You don't have to worry about you don't have to worry about if you're on one side of the equation or the other. There's plenty of food options. Let's talk about side effects or possible side effects from serine use. You see here, no clear long-term research has been done. This goes back to money, financial funding of trials. But that being said, we've also do have clinical trials with doses as high as 15 to 30 grams a day. Now, what we were talking about earlier, the highest study I showed you for benefit was 3 grams a day. So these guys are doing 15 to 30 grams a day. And when you get up into that level, you start getting some nausea and some stomach problems. But at doses relatively lower, 3 grams and less, clinically speaking, in my experience, we don't really see any major side effects. People generally tolerate serine extremely well, whether it's in the L-serine form or in the phosphatidylserine form. Again, those are the two main types that you can take supplementally. Now, in some of the studies here, just pointing out, they said there's not a lot of long-term studies, but you can see there have been some toxicology studies on serine in rats, no side effects, giving 1.3 grams of serine per kilogram of body weight by mouth. And then the study done in humans in 2017, this was a study on amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease, where they were giving 30 grams a day, and effect and mechanism, no side effect. They've done some studies on brain injury in rats where they were using, quite high doses, up to 504 milligrams per kilogram. And what they found more than anything else was an improvement in blood flow to the brain, but no real toxicology or toxicological issues. And then they found too that, and again, animals and traumatic brain injury in mice, they found at doses up to 1,000 milligrams per kilogram, the therapeutic effect of serine may be related to its inhibition of the injury process, especially the inhibition of microglial activation, which is, again, the specialized immune cells in the brain that lead to the inflammatory release and cause the damage. So there's toxicologically not a whole lot going on. I mean, some minor upset stomach and nausea were some of the biggest reports in this found. So, but not, again, the issue is not a lot of human research. Now, if we move into lab testing, there's some fundamental ways that you can have your serine levels measured. I've given you some reference ranges here, but plasma, I don't recommend urine. Let's just start here. I don't recommend urine testing at all for amino acid for serine specifically, because it's highly inaccurate, and that's been proven in a number of studies. But plasma levels, there's some acceptable based on some of the human genetic disorders. There's some plasma reference ranges that have been created. So you can see for adults, 100 to 170 micromoles per liter. And then for children, for pediatric, this is 18 or less, 100 to 250 micromoles per liter are pretty normal or typical lab reference ranges that you're going to come into. So if you're asking your doctor for this test, these are probably going to be somewhere around those reference ranges. But my favorite way to measure it is really it's INA, it's intracellular INA nutrient analysis. This is where you're actually measuring cellular function outcomes as a consequence to, is there enough is there enough serine fueling that cell's functionality? So INA is, in my opinion, a much better way to determine the need for whether or not supplementation is going to be beneficial. So if you, my creed is test, don't guess. Generally speaking, I've tested, oh gosh, I'd say well over 100,000 micronutrient analyses in my career. And we see serine deficiency present in, it's not uncommon. I would say probably 10 to 20% of cases if I went back and actually did the data on my patient population. So it's not an uncommon deficiency, although they'll talk about, when you read about this stuff online, they'll talk about how it's very uncommon or not common at all unless you have one of the genetic disorders, but we see it on a regular basis. And clinically speaking, some of the best things that we see as outcomes when using or correcting serine, we see a lot of times it's people with sleep issues. It's people that have what we would call stress intolerance, where they just don't tolerate stress very well. Like little stresses become big stress to them. Those are probably two of the biggest clinical ramifications that we see. I've also seen cases where serine has been very beneficial to a person who has skin inflammation, as well as musculoskeletal aches and pains. We've seen that be the case. And in some cases, we've seen serine really help with cardiovascular risk factors. So as I mentioned earlier, one of the side effects of the human trials was it found that serine administration actually lowered blood pressure, and that was a surprising result. But I can corroborate that, and we have seen that in our clinic as well. So there you have it, serine. If you struggle with chronic stress, with brain fog, with memory issues, if you're having a hard time remembering where you put your keys or what you came into the kitchen or to the bedroom for, you might just consider serine as a potential mechanism to help support your brain and cognitive function. If you struggle with ADD or ADHD, you might also consider this, especially in lieu of the fact if you're taking, strong pharmaceutical medications that have ramifications and side effects that may catch up with you later down the road. So hopefully you'll consider serine. If you enjoyed this class on serine, you should check out my library on amino acids. We've done crash courses on many of them, and you can check those out here. Thank you so much for tuning in to Dr. Osborne's Zone. Hope you have a fantastic day. And don't forget to join us on Thursdays at 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time for a live Q&A all about nutrition. Take care.